When the richest man in the room asked a question no one could answer, silence fell, until a voice from the back shattered everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, he's here." The words slipped out of the maitre d's mouth like a secret no one was supposed to hear, but in that grand ballroom, whispers traveled fast. Crystal glasses paused mid-air. Forks stopped scraping porcelain plates. Every head turned toward the entrance of the Marlowe Estate's gilded hall. Standing in the doorway was a man who could silence a room without saying a word. Sheikh Omar Al-Fayez, billionaire oil magnate, investor, a man whose name meant influence in ways most people in this room couldn't even spell out. He didn't just walk in, he glided, dressed in an immaculate white thobe, the traditional Middle Eastern attire draped over his frame like royalty. His headpiece, a pristine gutra, held in place with an elegant black agal, sat perfectly on his head. The gala had been the event of the season in Scottsdale, Arizona, a charity night to raise funds for a new children's hospital wing. The kind of night where old money meets new influencers, and everyone pretends their generosity isn't just another networking strategy. People had come dressed like they were walking into a Vanity Fair shoot. Gowns swept the polished marble floor, diamonds glittered like city lights, and every smile hid a question. Who's watching me? But no one expected Omar. The moment he entered, you could feel the shift in the air. Men straightened their jackets. Women adjusted their dresses. Suddenly, every billionaire in the room wasn't the richest person anymore. Omar's presence alone made fortunes feel small. He didn't offer a polite nod. He didn't shake hands. Instead, he turned to his entourage, a group of stern-faced men in dark suits, and spoke in Arabic. His tone was calm, almost casual, yet commanding. And that's when the silence deepened, because no one understood him. People glanced at each other, fake smiles glued to their faces as if trying to decode his words from thin air. The chairman of the charity board, a red-faced man named Gerald Prescott, stuttered as he approached, forcing a laugh. "Ah, Sheikh Omar! Welcome, welcome! We're honored!" Gerald extended his hand, but Omar didn't take it. He kept speaking in Arabic, this time looking directly at Gerald as if expecting an answer. The poor man froze. Sweat began to form near his temple. The whispers grew louder now. "Does anyone, speak Arabic?" Gerald blurted out, desperate and grinning like he had everything under control. He didn't. Phones discreetly came out of clutches and tuxedo pockets. People started Googling phrases under the tablecloth, pretending to check messages. It was a mess of wealth and insecurity on full display. And then, right by the buffet table where no one was looking, someone did understand. Her name was Danielle Rhodes. She had been moving quietly through the crowd all evening, refilling champagne glasses, clearing empty plates, making herself invisible like every other server in the room. Danielle wasn't part of their world. She didn't belong to the high society or the luxury whispers. She wore a crisp black uniform, sensible shoes, and a name tag no one bothered to read. But her eyes, they didn't miss a thing. When Omar spoke, her head tilted slightly, her hands freezing for a second over a tray of petit four. The words he used weren't complicated, but the meaning behind them? Sharp. He wasn't making small talk. He was asking where the donation money was going, and why the promised hospital project hadn't even broken ground. Danielle's heart pounded. She shouldn't get involved. This wasn't her business. But something inside her stirred. Across the room, Gerald was stammering again, his cheeks now crimson. Sheikh Omar, English? Maybe? Omar's brows lowered slightly. He said something else in Arabic. The room grew even more uncomfortable. People were staring. The music that had been playing in the background felt like a bad joke now. And that's when Danielle put down the tray. Her legs moved before her mind could catch up. But no one was prepared for what came out of her mouth next. Before that moment, before all eyes turned to the woman no one had noticed, the Marlowe estate had been a symphony of wealth and calculated charm. Imagine this: chandeliers dripping with crystals that caught the golden glow of candlelight, polished marble floors reflecting the shine of shoes that cost more than most people's rent, and the faint aroma of truffle risotto weaving through the air like an expensive secret. The gala wasn't just a party. It was a chessboard, and every guest was a piece. You could almost see the strategies in motion. Smiles weren't just smiles. They were negotiations disguised as compliments. Conversations were investments. Every handshake was a deal waiting to happen. And then there was the contrast. People who blended into the background, the waitstaff, the servers like Danielle, the ones you only saw when your glass was empty or your plate was full. Danielle had worked plenty of events like this. Scottsdale was full of them. Charity balls, fundraisers, silent auctions where the only thing louder than the bids was the hunger for status. Tonight was no different, except it was. She'd been on her feet since 3 p.m., setting tables, folding napkins into swans, making sure every crystal flute stood in perfect alignment. Her hands moved like clockwork, muscle memory built over years of service jobs. She didn't hate her work, but it wasn't her dream either. Truth? Danielle didn't even have a clear dream anymore. Life had a way of beating those out of you when bills came faster than paychecks. She checked her reflection in the mirrored wall earlier, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, her uniform spotless. Presentation mattered here, even when people looked straight through you, and they always did. Until now. Now the ballroom was a stage, and Sheikh Omar had taken center position without effort. Danielle wasn't shocked he showed up. Rumors had been swirling all night that a big donor was coming, but she hadn't expected this energy, this presence. He didn't just look powerful, he radiated it. And the way he spoke in Arabic, completely unbothered by the awkwardness his words created, was a power move Danielle recognized even if no one else did. This wasn't arrogance, it was intent. He wanted to see who would meet him where he was. Spoiler alert, no one did. Gerald Prescott was sweating bullets at this point. His voice cracked when he called for a translator, like he thought one might appear out of thin air. Guests exchanged nervous laughs, some pretending they understood what was happening, while others pulled out their phones to check messages, secretly fumbling with translation apps. Danielle could almost hear their thoughts. Why doesn't he speak English? Doesn't he know where he is? But Omar knew exactly where he was, and Danielle knew exactly what he was saying. She'd learned Arabic years ago, not in school, not because she had a plan to use it at a fancy gala. Life had just taken her there. A chapter she didn't talk about much, a chapter no one in this room could imagine. Her fingers tightened on the tray she carried, knuckles whitening for a second as the conversation echoed in her head. Where is the accountability for this project? Promises were made, millions pledged, and yet, nothing. That wasn't small talk. That was a demand, and no one else understood it. Her heartbeat thudded like a drum line. She could ignore it. Stay invisible like always. Just refill glasses, clear plates, keep smiling that polite smile no one ever really looked at. But then Gerald laughed nervously again, his voice pitching higher as he repeated, Sheikh Omar, English, please? The tone grated on Danielle. Not because Gerald didn't speak Arabic, most people didn't, but because of the arrogance in assuming Omar should cater to them, in assuming that language equals worth. Danielle swallowed hard. She set the tray down on a side table, her hands trembling just slightly, and wiped them on her apron. Her legs felt like they were moving without her permission. The crowd didn't notice her at first. Why would they? She was background noise to them, until she spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, but it cut through the air like a blade. Hoyesal al-amwal. Heads turned so fast you could almost hear the necks crack. Every conversation in the room died. Forks hovered mid-air. Phones slipped from fingers. And Danielle stood there, looking straight at Sheikh Omar, and continued, in flawless, confident Arabic. But if they thought that was shocking, what Omar said back was about to turn the entire night upside down. The sound of her voice in Arabic hit that ballroom like a glass shattering on marble. Every head swung toward Danielle. For the first time all night, people actually saw her, not the uniform, not the name tag, but her. And if looks could speak, the silence was screaming, "Who is she?" Danielle didn't flinch. She kept her gaze locked on Omar, her tone respectful but firm. You're asking about the funds, correct? About why the hospital hasn't started construction yet? Omar's brows lifted slightly. A flicker of something crossed his face, surprise, then curiosity. He responded in Arabic, his voice carrying a weight that made even the chandeliers seem to bow. Naam, هذا صحيح. هل يمكنك أن تشرح لي? Yes, that's correct. Can you explain to me? And just like that, the room froze again. Because now Omar wasn't speaking into the void. He was having a full conversation with the maid. Danielle's heart hammered in her chest. She hadn't planned this. She just wanted to clear plates, earn her paycheck, go home, and collapse into bed. But life has a funny way of throwing you into the spotlight when you least expect it. Gerald Prescott finally found his voice, or what was left of it. He stammered, excuse me, what's happening here? Miss, do you know what he's saying? Danielle turned slightly toward Gerald, but didn't drop her composure. Yes, he's asking why the charity money hasn't been used as promised. You could feel the shift in the air. Guests exchanged looks. Some were intrigued. Others were annoyed. But most, they were embarrassed, because the woman they hadn't noticed all night had just become the most important person in the room. Omar said something again, this time softer, but his eyes never left hers. أنت تتحدثين العربية بطلاقة. من أين تعلمت ذلك? You speak Arabic fluently. Where did you learn that? Danielle hesitated. For the briefest second, her throat tightened. Memories flickered, years ago, a different life, a relationship that ended in heartbreak but left her with this skill. But that wasn't anyone's business tonight. لقد عشت في دبي لفترة. I lived in Dubai for a while. Her pronunciation was clean, her confidence solid. And that's when it happened. The tiniest smile curved at the corner of Omar's lips, not mockery, not arrogance, something else, interest. Around them, the gala was spiraling. Guests whispered like wildfire. Did she just say Dubai? Wait, she lived there? Who is this woman? Phones were out now, not for Google Translate, but for videos. Because this was the moment that would go viral by morning. A billionaire sheikh speaking Arabic in an American charity gala, and the only person answering him wasn't the board chair, wasn't the CEO, wasn't any of the self-proclaimed global citizens in the room. It was the maid. Gerald, desperate to reclaim control, cleared his throat. Miss Rhodes, Danielle, is it? Yes, thank you, but we'll handle this from here. He waved a dismissive hand, the kind that said, "You've done enough. Go back to the sidelines." Danielle felt the weight of those words. They weren't said outright, but they carried the same message she'd heard her whole life. Stay in your place. She looked at Gerald, then back at Omar, who was still waiting patiently. And something inside her shifted, because for the first time in years, someone wasn't looking through her. Omar was looking at her, listening to her. She squared her shoulders and translated Gerald's flimsy excuses in Arabic, keeping her tone neutral, even though the words tasted bitter in her mouth. He says there have been delays, but everything is under control. Omar's eyes narrowed slightly, and his next words made Danielle's stomach twist. هل هو يقول حقيقة? Is he telling the truth? Danielle hesitated. For a split second, she could feel the weight of both worlds pressing on her. The safe choice? Lie. Keep her head down. Pretend everything was fine. But safe choices never change lives. She inhaled slowly and answered, her voice barely above a whisper but clear enough for Omar to hear. La. No. But that single word? It didn't just silence the room. It lit a fuse that was about to blow the entire night wide open. The sound of that no was heavier than the chandeliers above. It didn't just float in the air. It dropped like a stone into a still lake, sending ripples through every pair of eyes locked on her. Gerald's jaw practically hit the floor. Excuse me? What did you just say to him? His voice cracked like glass under pressure. Danielle didn't back down. Her voice was steady, but her pulse was wild. She turned slightly toward Gerald, her words measured. I told him the truth, that everything is not under control. Gasps fluttered through the room like startled birds. A woman in a silver gown covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Phones tilted upward, recording every angle of this collision between status and truth. Omar didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply studied Danielle, his eyes sharp yet calm, like a man who had been waiting for honesty all night. Then, in Arabic, he spoke again. أخبريني, لماذا تقولين ذلك? Tell me, why do you say that? Danielle swallowed hard. Her palms were slick now, her heart banging against her ribs like it wanted out. She didn't owe this room anything. But Omar, he asked her directly, and something about being acknowledged in a way she hadn't felt in years, made her speak. لأنني سمعت حديثهم في المطبخ. المشروع لم يبدأ حتى. الأموال مفقودة أو تم إنفاقها في أماكن أخرى. Because I overheard them in the kitchen. The project hasn't even started. The money is missing or spent elsewhere. You could have heard a pin drop. Every head swiveled toward Gerald now, their eyes slicing through his glossy smile like blades. His face turned crimson, then pale, then a shade of purple Danielle didn't know existed. What? This is outrageous. She's a server. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Gerald spat, his words trembling with panic. But Danielle wasn't finished. She turned back to Omar, ignoring the way whispers clung to her like smoke. أنا آسفة أن أقول ذلك أمام الجميع لكنك تستحق أن تعرف. I'm sorry to say this in front of everyone, but you deserve to know. And that was it. That was the moment. The one no one saw coming. The maid who dared to tell the truth in a room built on lies. Omar leaned back slightly, exhaling a long, deliberate breath. Then he spoke. Not to Gerald, not to the board members fidgeting in their designer suits, but to her. Ma ismak. What is your name? Danielle hesitated for half a second. No one had asked her that all night. Not one person. She straightened her shoulders, her voice clear. Danielle Rhodes. Omar repeated it slowly, like he was tasting the sound. Danielle. His eyes softened, just a fraction, but his tone still carried authority when he turned back to Gerald and switched to English for the first time that night. Mr. Prescott, he said, his voice deep and controlled, I think we need to talk. The crowd buzzed with nervous energy now. People shifted, murmured, stared. Some were secretly thrilled to watch Gerald squirm. Others looked like they wanted to vanish into the floor. But no one was watching Gerald anymore. They were watching Danielle, the woman who had just cracked the glossy surface of this entire event. Gerald stammered something about misunderstandings and donor relations. But Omar silenced him with a single glance. That kind of power? You don't fake it. Then, to everyone's shock, Omar turned back to Danielle and said something that made her stomach flip. Tali, emshi mai. Come, walk with me. A collective gasp swept through the room. The billionaire Sheikh wasn't just acknowledging the maid, he was inviting her into his world, right there in front of everyone. Danielle froze for a heartbeat. Every instinct screamed, don't do it. Stay where you belong. Don't make this worse. But deep down, she knew the truth. This was a crossroads. One of those moments life doesn't hand you twice. Her legs moved. One step, then another. And the crowd parted like a wave as she walked beside Omar, feeling every set of eyes burning holes into her back. But what Omar wanted to tell her in private, that was something Danielle could have never imagined, even in her wildest dreams. As Danielle followed Omar through the throng of glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos, it was like stepping through a storm of whispers. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Who is she? Did you hear that? She speaks Arabic. Why is he taking her with him? Oh, this is going to be everywhere by morning. Phones were tilted, cameras snapping discreet photos that weren't so discreet. The glow of screens lit faces twisted in curiosity, envy, and thinly veiled disdain. Danielle felt every stare like heat against her skin, but she didn't slow her steps. Her breath came shallow, her pulse hammering, but she kept her head high. Omar led her toward the rear corridor, a quieter part of the estate reserved for staff access and private discussions. The music faded behind them, replaced by the soft echo of their footsteps on the polished marble. When they were finally alone, he stopped, turned, and for the first time, Danielle realized just how tall he was. His presence had filled the ballroom like a tidal wave, but here, up close, he was something else. Composed, controlled. Yet there was an intensity in his eyes that made it hard to look away. Aridik and tashrahi li kul shay. I want you to explain everything to me. Danielle inhaled sharply, then exhaled slow, grounding herself. سمعتهم يتحدثون في المطبخ. المشروع لم يبدأ بعد. قالوا إن الأموال تم استخدامها لتغطية نفقات شخصية لبعض الأعضاء. I heard them talking in the kitchen. The project hasn't started yet. They said the money was used to cover personal expenses for some members. Omar's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in focus. He paced a short line before stopping in front of her again. His voice dropped, low and deliberate. أتعلمين ماذا يعني هذا? Do you know what this means? Danielle hesitated. إنه كان سيكتشف الحقيقة عاجلا أم آجلا. That you were going to find out the truth sooner or later. A slow smile curved his lips, not mocking, more like admiration. Sahih, correct. Then his tone shifted, softer now. ولماذا أخبرتني؟ لم يكن عليك أن تتدخلي. And why did you tell me? You didn't have to involve yourself. Danielle looked down at her hands for a second. She thought about lying, about saying something neat and polite like, because it was the right thing to do. But the truth was messier. لأنني كرهت أن أراهم يكذبون أمامك وكأنك لا تستحق الحقيقة. Because I hated seeing them lie to you like you didn't deserve the truth. Silence stretched between them for a beat. Then two, until Omar said something that made her heart stop. تعلمين أنت مختلفة عنهم. You know, you're different from them. Her eyes flicked up, surprised. ماذا تقصد? What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. He studied her, his gaze searching, calculating, almost as if he was trying to read the parts of her life she kept hidden. Finally, he spoke in English, his voice smooth as polished steel. You don't play their game. You speak truth when everyone else speaks comfort. That is rare. Danielle swallowed hard. She didn't know what to say to that, so she stayed quiet. Omar stepped closer, not threatening, but commanding. Tell me, Danielle, what are you doing here? The question hit like a punch, because it wasn't about tonight. It was bigger than that. What are you doing with your life? Why are you serving canapes when you clearly belong somewhere else? She felt her throat tighten, words clawing to come out. But before she could answer, a loud, frantic voice cut through the corridor. Mr. Alfayez, please, just 1 minute. Gerald came barreling toward them, his face glistening like a man who'd just wrestled with panic in the bathroom mirror. 2 board members trailed behind him like obedient shadows. Sir, Gerald puffed, forcing a smile so wide it looked painful. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. Whatever this, employee told you, it's not accurate. There are complexities, of course, but Omar raised a hand, just a slight movement, but it shut Gerald down mid-sentence. His voice, when it came, was cold enough to freeze water. Enough. Gerald blinked, his mouth opened, then closed. He wasn't used to being dismissed like that, not in his own world. Omar turned back to Danielle, and that's when he said the words that sent the night spinning in a direction no one could have predicted. Walk with me. Not to talk about charity, to talk about possibilities. But what Omar had in mind wasn't just generous. It was life-changing. And Danielle, she wasn't ready for what came next. Danielle followed him again, this time deeper into the estate, past a set of heavy glass doors that led to an outdoor terrace overlooking the desert night. The city lights of Scottsdale shimmered in the distance, but out here, it felt like another world. Quiet, open, a sky so black it looked endless, pierced by 1,000 silver stars. The chill in the air brushed against her skin, but she barely felt it. Her nerves were too loud, her thoughts too wild. She wasn't supposed to be here, not standing on marble tiles next to a man who could buy entire countries without blinking. She was a maid, a part-time server juggling overdue bills and student loans that never seemed to shrink. She wasn't this. Omar moved to the edge of the terrace, resting one hand on the stone railing. His back was to her at first, his white thobe flowing gently in the breeze like some scene out of a movie. When he turned, his face was calm but unreadable, a poker face honed over decades of power plays. Sit, he said simply, gesturing toward a chair near the table set with half-empty champagne flutes. Danielle hesitated for a fraction of a second, then sat. Her heart was still racing, her hands gripping her knees beneath the table like anchors. He studied her for a moment, not in the way men in the city sometimes did, calculating, assessing, objectifying, but like someone peeling back layers, trying to see what was buried underneath. Do you know why I came tonight? Omar asked, his voice low and smooth. Danielle shook her head. To donate? He gave a short, quiet laugh. Not exactly. Money is easy. Trust is not. I came to see if these people were worth mine. Her throat tightened. She thought about Gerald, about the board whispering in corners while pretending to smile, about the way they looked at Omar, hungry, desperate, dishonest. And then she thought about herself, standing invisible with a tray in her hand, until one choice changed everything. "Looks like you got your answer," she murmured. Omar leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. His eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her chest feel too small. "Yes," he said, and it was not the answer they hoped for. Danielle swallowed hard. "So, what happens now?" He tilted his head. "What happens now? Depends on you." Her heart stopped for half a beat. "Me?" "Yes, you spoke when you didn't have to. You told me the truth when everyone else stayed silent. That means something to me." She blinked. Her mind scrambled to process the weight behind his words. This wasn't a compliment. It was an invitation. Omar continued, his tone measured. "I need people like that. People who understand loyalty, who aren't afraid of honesty, people who can move in silence when it matters and speak when it counts. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?" Danielle's pulse throbbed in her ears. Was he offering her a job, a chance, a way out of the grind she'd been stuck in for years? "I think so," she said softly. He gave a slow nod. "You have a sharp mind, Danielle. And you speak Arabic better than most diplomats I've met in Washington. That's not an accident. That's experience. You've lived. You've seen things most people in that room could never imagine. And that is value." Her throat tightened again, this time with something heavier than nerves. It was hope. Dangerous, blinding hope. "So," Omar said, his voice dropping into a tone that felt like both a challenge and a promise. "What do you want? Do you want to keep serving plates in rooms full of people who never see you? Or do you want something more?" Danielle stared at him, the weight of the question pressing down on every bone in her body. She thought about the bills on her kitchen counter, about the car barely holding on to its last mile, about the dream she once had, the one she buried under shifts and survival. Her lips parted, but before she could answer, the glass doors behind them burst open. "Sir!" It was Gerald again, breathless, his face flushed from chasing them. Two men from the board flanked him, their expressions somewhere between panic and rage. "We really need to resolve this, privately, away from staff." The way he said staff made Danielle's stomach clench, but Omar didn't even look at him. He kept his eyes on her as if Gerald didn't exist. "Think carefully," Omar murmured in Arabic, his voice so low it was almost a whisper. "El-qararat al-saghira, tasna al-farq al-akbar." Small decisions make the biggest difference. Danielle's fingers curled against her knees, because deep down she already knew her answer. But when she opened her mouth to speak, Omar made an offer that would change her life forever. And it wasn't just about money. The night hung in suspense, every second stretching like a taut wire. Danielle's lips parted, ready to answer, but Omar raised one hand gently, stopping her, not in dismissal, but in control. "Before you speak," he said, his voice rich and unwavering, "let me make this simple." He leaned forward, resting both palms on the cool marble table, and what he said next made the world tilt on its axis. "I want you to come work for me, not as staff, not as an assistant, as an advisor, someone I can trust when I cannot trust anyone else." Danielle's breath hitched. "An advisor?" Omar nodded once. "I handle negotiations that span continents, deals worth billions. People smile in my face and plan against me behind closed doors. I need someone who sees through that, someone who has nothing to gain from lying to me. Tonight, you prove two things. You can speak truth, and you can stand under pressure. That is more valuable than money." Her mouth went dry. She wasn't sure if she was breathing anymore. "But why me? You don't even know me." A flicker of a smile touched his lips. "That's where you're wrong. I know everything I need to. You've worked hard in silence. You've lived outside their glass towers, so you understand the world for what it is, not what it pretends to be. And above all, Danielle." He paused, his tone sharpening like a blade. "You speak when it matters. Most people never do." Gerald was sputtering behind them, his words spilling like marbles on a tile floor. "Sir, this is insane. She's a server. She doesn't belong in your world. She doesn't..." Enough. Omar's voice cut through the night like thunder. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. Gerald went silent, his face draining of color. Omar turned back to Danielle, his eyes locked on hers with a weight that felt like gravity. You will start in Dubai. 1 year. I will cover everything. Housing, travel, security. Your salary will be generous. How generous? She asked before she could stop herself. His smile widened slightly, as if he appreciated the boldness. 7 figures. Danielle's knees nearly buckled. A year ago, she was rationing groceries to pay her electricity bill. And now, a billionaire was offering her a future she couldn't even imagine in her wildest dreams. The terrace felt smaller, the stars brighter, the silence heavier. Because this wasn't just a job offer. This was a door swinging open to an entirely different life. Think about it, Omar said, his voice soft now, like velvet over steel. But don't take too long. Opportunities don't wait. Danielle stared at him, her heart pounding so hard it felt like the night could hear it. And then, slowly, she nodded. Not because she'd thought it through, not because it was safe, but because for the first time in years, something inside her whispered louder than fear. You were meant for more. Behind them, Gerald's voice cracked, like a man watching his empire slip through his fingers. You can't just take her? Omar turned slightly, his words cool as ice. Watch me. And just like that, the game changed. Forever. Danielle didn't know what the next year would bring, power, danger, respect, or betrayal. But she knew one thing. She'd never be invisible again. Because sometimes, one small decision, one word, one truth, can turn an ordinary life into something extraordinary. Never underestimate the value of integrity. In a world where everyone's performing, authenticity isn't just rare, it's powerful. If you believe honesty can change lives, share this story with someone who needs that reminder today. And subscribe for more stories that prove your voice matters.